Good evening, I'm Abe, that's Frank, and that's Carnegie. Tonight, we're adumbrating the second half of Chapter 28, Progressivism and the Republican Roosevelt, in Kennedy, Cohen, and Bailey's The American Pageant textbook. So let's get started.
Alright, Carnegie, Kennedy has a tradition of telling us about a panic every couple of years. Could you tell me about the panic under Roosevelt in 1907?
Well, through Roosevelt's progressive actions, such as his calls for income taxes and worker protection, Roosevelt alarmed traditional conservatives. Though this worry was partly erased by Roosevelt's assurance that he would not run for office in 1908, the financial world still blamed him for the panic of 1907. In response to this panic, Congress passed the Aldrich-Vreeland Act, which allowed banks to issue emergency currency as long as it was backed by collateral. This legislation paved the way for the Federal Reserve Act 6 years later. Now, Frank, how did the presidency of... what was the long-term impacts of President Roosevelt?
Well, since Roosevelt had promised not to run in 1908, as you already pointed out, he handpicked his successor, the corpulent William Taft. Taft ran on a platform of continuing popular Rooseveltian politics, and therefore easily beat William Jennings Bryan and Eugene Debs, the socialist. Even after he left office, Roosevelt attracted massive popularity. Insofar as he had enhanced the power of the president, he had also passed vital legislation central to preserving and preventing the rise of American socialism and preserving American capitalism, such as seen in his Square Deal. But Abe, I'm sure you have a lot to tell us about Taft, don't you?
I sure do. Taft was not a dashing political leader like Roosevelt, and he generally had a passive attitude towards Congress. Taft was still a mild progressive, but he was overall satisfied with the status quo. That should do it, Frank.
Is that it?
Thanks.
Okay.
Cool.
So, Carnegie, how would you characterize Taft's foreign policy?
Well, Taft introduced a policy of dollar diplomacy, in which the government would encourage bankers to invest in foreign areas of concern to the U.S. China's Manchuria was the biggest target for dollar diplomacy. Philander C. Knox, U.S. Secretary of State, wanted Americans to buy Manchurian railroads and then give them back to China. However, Japan and Russia refused Knox's proposal, and Taft was humiliated. And in the Caribbean, the U.S. disallowed foreign nations to intervene under the Monroe Doctrine. Nonetheless, the U.S. hypocritically sent troops to the Caribbean to restore order and protect investments. Now, Frank, how did Taft crack down on the trusts?
Well, despite being a conservative, Taft quickly gained a well-earned reputation for smashing monopolies. That is showcased by the fact that throughout his 4 years in office, he brought down over 90 different trusts, even ones that Roosevelt had promised to leave alone, such as the U.S. Steel Corporation. Through these actions, he created a rift between himself and his former friend and colleague, Theodore Roosevelt. But Abe, can you elaborate on that? How did the Republican Party eventually fracture?
Well, it all started when the Republicans wanted to lower the tariff. Taft approved the Payne-Aldrich bill, in which very few items were proclaimed tariff-free. In this case, he set himself apart from the Republican Party. Taft's reputation was further besmirched with the Ballinger-Pinchot quarrel, in which Taft dismissed Pinchot simply on the basis of insubordination, or refusal to obey orders. Thus, under Taft, the Republican Party was split between Taft and Roosevelt, and the Republicans hence lost the congressional election of 1910. So, Carnegie, could you further elaborate on this Republican rift?
Of course. The split inside the Republicans deepened as the election of 1912 approached. Roosevelt, angered with Taft's actions during his first term, famously declared, "My hat is in the ring," symbolizing he had revoked his promise, limiting himself to 2 terms, and was prepared to run for a third. In response, the Republican Party became deeply divided, with progressive Republicans voting for Roosevelt and conservative Republicans voting for Taft.
This chapter showcases the transition of American social and political scene from the 19th century to the 20th. The semblances of long-lasting institutions and legislations begin to come into effect, be it with the Federal Reserve or laws bringing about banning monopolies. Now, more than ever, modern America as we know it is beginning to form.
Thank you for watching. Please like,
comment,
and subscribe.
and we will catch you guys in chapter 29.
Or next time.